Okay, so this is like the first lecture for the second part of this module. So the first part we cover the view, which is most exclusively for the front end. So that's part the user see. So now we move on to the second or the middle part of the module, and we're going to exclusively talk about the backend. So this is the database, and how do you make your app even working offline. So how do you save the data locally so you even can work without database? Okay, and so before that, we're going to have a look at the development stack, what that means, what different components we're going to use for this module, and then introducing Node.js, so which is the server we're going to use. So, and if you still remember the XAMPP from the second year module, and so the Node.js will be the equivalent of the Apache in the XAMPP stack. Okay, I'm going to explain that very soon. Okay, and so first, I want to explain what is a stack. So this is like the picture of a stack. So these are all the things you need for the app to work. So you need the front end, which is what the user see runs in the browser or on your phone. And then you need a server. And usually it has something called middleware, which talks to the database. The whole thing is called stack. Yeah? Okay, and these are some examples of popular stacks. So obviously in the second year, we came across the term called XAMPP. And really, it is a stack composed of, say, Apache as a web server, MySQL as a database, and PHP as a language that you're talking between all these. So if you look at the actual picture, you can see you have Apache running in the middle, MySQL database at the end, and the PHP is doing the front end, but also doing the talking between all these three components. And then you have different versions or variations of this stack. So you had LAMP, XAMPP, XAMPP, MAMP, and different one. Okay, but they're all based on the same stack of these three things with some variations. Yeah, and so this is one of the kind of maybe quite popular 10, 15 years ago, and it actually requires a few different languages to get it to work. So you need to understand PHP, and the Apache is written in C. So if you need to do anything on the server side, you need to use C. And the MySQL database uses its own SQL languages to query. So that's one of the less convenient facts for this AMP stack. Okay, and the more modern ones in the stack start with ME something in between and N. Okay, so the M stands for MongoDB, which we came across before in second year. E stands for Express. We also mentioned Express briefly in the second year. So the Express is the middleware. So that's Express. So obviously MongoDB is the end, that's the database. So the Express is in the middleware, which is the E. And then the X stands for actually the front end. So what you use here. And finally, the N stands for Node.js, which is the server. So that's this big blue box. Okay. So there's a few variations of this. Depends on what the front end you use. And this part is more or less fixed. So there's always Node.js plus Express with MongoDB as a database. So for a while, it's very popular, say, called MEAN, M-E-A-N, where the A stands for Angular. And then you now have instead of using Angular, someone using React. So that becomes MERN. And in our case, we're going to be using Vue for the front end. So mem or something can't really say this one, but this is a stack I'm going to use for this module. And so far we covered this part. So we talked about how to use Vue to build front end. So from this week on, we're going to look at this part and the Node.js and Express. So we already covered the MongoDB last year, so we're not going to cover that again. Just only mention that very briefly. Yeah, so we're going to spend about 3 weeks and to look at how the Node.js and Express work and how to use that to build your backend. Okay, and as we said, we're going to use Node.js as a server. So the first thing you need to install it, and you might already have that on your computer. So what you need to do is open your command line or terminal on your computer and type in this node dash v, node space dash v. What it spends, it just says, I want to show the version of node on my computer. And if you say something command not found, that means it's not installed. But if it shows some version, it shows it's already installed. So say on my computer, if I do say node, or maybe just do a clear. And is this big enough? Can you see this? And the things I type in command line. So I type node dash v, and it tells me, okay, I have something in return says 12.12.0. That means I already have my node installed. Okay. And if you installed, you don't have to worry about that now. And if you haven't, so you can go to that URL there, node.js.org, and it should something look like this. And for our module, either version will be fine. You can either download the LTS. Anyone knows what LTS stands for? Sorry? Latest version, okay. But this looks a little bit later than that. Okay, so this is quite common. It stands for long-term support. So this is for, say, the companies or the enterprise who don't like to upgrade their versions all the time. So they have so-called long-term support. That means they'll be keep supporting this version for a little bit longer than usual. So either version will be fine. And then, yeah. So on Windows, it will be quite straightforward. Click on one of these, it will give you a file, and then you run it and install. I don't think I have to walk you through that. Okay, and so there's one thing that comes with actually the Node.js server, and it's called npm. So it's a short word for Node Package Manager. Okay, this is actually very important, probably even more important than Node.js itself. So the philosophy of the Node.js is it comes with a very bare minimum and set of functions. So most of the things you actually need to develop your app will have to be installed, and these are called packages. And so the npm will help you to find all these app packages and install them for you. That's very important. Okay, anyone using Mac here? Okay. So if you're using Mac, and you can also install and by downloading from the web page, but also recommended way is actually using Brew, the home brew. Some of I heard that from second year. So you can first, if you don't have home brew, you have to copy this line of code, run that in your command line to install home brew, and then you do a brew update, which updates itself and its directory, and say brew install node, so install Node.js on your computer as well. And then if you want, later on, for example, there's a new version come up, and you want to upgrade your node, say brew upgrade node. So this works for any other packages, so it doesn't have to be Node. Other packages you can install with that. Okay, and so once you're installed, then you can check now. So you can either type node -v, which we said before, shows versions of Node, but also you can do npm -v. So that we said this is the package manager, which is quite important, and you should see something like this. So, for example, if I type npm, okay, so that's the version I'm currently have on my computer. But you should see either of these, and that means it's installed and working properly. Yeah, did you all get it running? Because later I'm going to start using Node.js command, so we need it to be running. Yeah. So anyone have problems getting it installed or running? Ah. Which way did you try? Ah, okay. It just takes a little bit of time, I think, if you're installing the first time through Wi-Fi. And okay, so once you have it installed, and you can just type node as a command in a command line, and it will open up its own command line environment. In a sense, inside that you can just type node command and it will recognize. And so this is, and if you remember from MongoDB, if you just type Mongo, it will open up the command line interface to Mongo, and you can type your command. It's the same thing here. So if I type node, and in my command line, and it will show something like this. It says, and welcome to Node.js, this version, and you can type .help for more information. But now, basically, we can type any node command here now, as a command line environment. Okay, and so the first thing to remember is Node.js is very similar to the JavaScript code you have been using so far, almost identical with a few differences. And then then you can just do these things in the Node command interface, and it will just work as you would expect in JavaScript. And so if you're typing and 1 plus 2, oops, and do a calculation, and if you try to okay, so I didn't do exactly what it should. So do you know what this one does? So basically, it would say try to join these three strings together, just as you would have done in JavaScript. And you would say hello world, so return that string. Okay, and you can define some variables a, b, and then try to calculate the values of a plus b, and these will all work just as you would do in normal JavaScript. Okay, and then but there's some important differences. The most important differences is for Node, it does not have a browser running, so it does not exist, say, document or any DOM element. So, for example, maybe your favorite method so far will be, say, document get element by ID, which does not work in Node because it does not have a window or HTML document, so it can't do any of those. So that's the main difference. Okay, and some other unique things for Node.js. something will be much more often you're going to use something like a require, which we'll cover a little bit later on. Okay. So next part is, so you write your code for Node.js, and once you finish, and so these will be JavaScript files, so there will still be, say, .js at the end. And if you want to run it with Node, so you just type Node followed by your code name, or the code file name. So in this case, all my code is in a JavaScript file called program.js. So the command line to run that is type node program.js. And you have to be in the directory where the program.js is and to run it. We're going to see some examples soon. Okay, and so the next example is sometimes if you just want to test something very quickly, for example, I just want to do a console log. So I don't want to create a file, say a JS file and write all the code. You can just say node -e followed by an actual node, say Node.js script, and then we'll just run it. And so, for example, currently, when I inside the node command line, I can do this command, but I don't need to do any of these before it. So I just do, say, console log new date. So this is supposed to give you the current date and then display it on the console. Okay, so it says that's the date today and exact time up to very precise seconds. Okay, and but for example, I think it's exit. Okay, Control D. Yeah, but if you just want to run this line of code on the command line using Node without actually creating, say, a date.js and then run the file. So you just type this line with the -e here. And so you say node -e okay? And so that's the equivalent. It will give you something like this. Okay, and then just to show you how do you actually run code like this way. So let's just create a very simple JS file and just called date.js. Okay, so what I did very quickly is I now excuse me. Now I created a file called date.js, and all it does is just have this line of code. So if I want to run this file, so I just type node followed by the file name, and which I'll try to run, and in this case, just and print out the date. Yeah. So these are 3 different ways you can run. Okay. And so now we look at the basics and basically the basics about Node.js, which essentially is the basics of JavaScript, which I'm sure you know most of it. So we're gonna just pick a few things. And so actually, this is something interesting. The Node.js actually was built on top of Chrome and JavaScript engine. So basically, within the Chrome, there's some code which will run any JavaScript you typed in or opened with Chrome browser. So that's called V8. And because Chrome is open source, so someone take that V8 out of Chrome and made it into Node.js server. So basically, if everything runs in Chrome, and it will run on Node.js very well, and as the Chrome versions or the V8 updates, and the nodes get updates as well. Okay, and then just something very quickly. These are the same in both Node.js and in just plain JavaScript. And so you have the so-called primitive data types, and just say they are not object. So these are the string, number, boolean, undefined, and null. So these are the primitives. And everything else is an object. So the class is an object, and the function is an object, and the array is object. Okay. And so the main difference between these two classes, besides now saying what is primitive and what is object, the main difference is say objects are passed by references, whereas primitives are passed by values. What anyone knows what does this mean? Yeah.
Characteristics that object is a characteristic are just characteristics with variables.
Not quite, not quite. So I think the main difference is passed by reference and passed by value. What's the difference between these two? Okay, let's say you have a simple function. All it does is say you have an input, and then it will make say add an extra character to the end of your input. Say add extra character A. Okay, so if we pass it to a primitive as a parameter to this function, it will be passed by value only. So it will do say take this text, add an extra character at the end, but the original variable will not change. So if the original variable is a, and this function adds 0 at the end, it will return a0, but the original variable will still have the value a. That means passed by values. That means basically I give you a copy of myself to the function. Anything you done inside function will not affect the original copy. Yeah. Whereas when you pass by reference, what it does is when I use this say object and as a parameter, and anything done or changes made inside the function will affect the original value. So what we pass it to it is not a copy of itself, but a reference to the original object. So if inside the function you change the object in some way, for example, add 0 to the original object, then the original object will change as well. Okay, so that's the difference. That's quite important. When you write your functions, you need to be aware. Okay. Okay. So this is about functions. I'm sure you all know about these. And so just a reminder, you have this difference between named functions. Basically, that means a function has a name. So for example, this is a function. And what's its name? No. What's the name of this function? F, that's right. So that's a, and this is called anonymous functions, where a function basically just means doesn't have a name. So if you forgot to the left of the equation, you can see function has no parameters and does something. Okay. So you have this very common in JavaScript. So basically, this does not have any name. This function. For example, in this case, it actually pass this function to a variable called f. Then you can reference this later. Otherwise, if you define this function, there's even no way to call it later because it doesn't have a name. There's no way to reference it. But this is quite useful sometimes. For example, if you need to pass a function as a parameter to another function, you not necessarily need a name, then you can do something like this. Okay, and also there's this thing. Is that new to you? CONST. Have you ever seen this before? Yeah. So it stands for constant. It's actually a new standard in ES6 or ES 2015 standard. Excuse me. So this is different from the original var, which stands for variable. That's use var for everything. So constant means something if you define this is not meant to change. Okay. So again, slightly trickier here. You say constant f equal to this function. That means f has to be pointing to this function all the time. But you can still make changes of this function itself. That's okay. So if you don't add extra lines inside this function, that's okay. But you cannot reassign f to a different function. That becomes constant. That's what a constant is. And so the opposite of the constant will be called anyway. So something that you can still change afterwards would be called. You use the keyword called let, L-E-T. So if you want to do something which you can still change later, you have to use L-E-T. Okay, and then at the end, this is again something new in the way it defines functions. So the left part of the equation is the same as before, constant f equal to something. Here, so instead of writing function, no parameter, and actual body of the function, you say an empty bracket, an arrow, and then the function body. That's all it is. So it saves you the typing the word function and replace it by an arrow after the bracket. Okay, you probably will see that more often. Again, this is something new since 2015, now supported in all the browsers. Okay, maybe not gonna spend too much time on this. Excuse me. But here is just to say, you can use function as a parameter. So in this case, this first function, this is one of the parameters for the function, and it most likely has to be a number, so it will return this. And in this case, you have two parameters for this function, but the first will be a number. The second one is the function itself. And you can return something like this. You can call the function. And then this is also where this pass by reference and pass by value comes in. So anything you do here, for example, you change the value of number, it will not affect the original one. But here, if you make any changes to the function fn, the function itself will be changed as well. Okay, so here are some unique things does not exist in normal JavaScript in the browser, but exists in Node.js. And so the first one is the process, and it's very much related to the operating system. It's almost like the browser, but you can see. But essentially, it just says what is the process that the Node.js server is running on. And the global stands for global variables, or things you can access globally in different parts of the Node.js code. And then this module and its export. We're going to look at these quite quickly. Okay. So first, do you know, say everything run in an operating system runs under something called a process. It doesn't matter whether it's Unix, macOS, or Windows. It's all work like this. For example, on Windows, have you ever say open the task manager and it will list all the process that is running? Have you ever seen that before? Yeah. So Windows Task Manager processes. Okay, so maybe this is like the more common one. And if you open the Windows Task Manager, you see these kind of things. So each of them is a process. So the same concept applies on Mac or Linux or as well. So Node, when it's running, it will just be running as one of these things on your operating system. And you can get a bit more information from the node. And for example, you can do this. Say, if you remember, -e just means you run some code directly from the command line. You don't have to put that in a JS file. It says console log process.pid. So the process is a module that comes with Node default, and .pid, it shows you the ID of the process that Node is running in. Okay, so you can do it different ways. We can do this here, or I can do it in the Node environment. Eh? Oh, sorry, PID. Okay. So that just basically means this is the ID assigned by the operating system. So currently, my node is running on this process ID. Okay, there's many other things you can do with this process package that you can do. Actually, I don't remember now. What is PWD? CWD? Okay. Okay. So this is maybe more useful when you actually write your code. So process.cwd will return this. It stands for current working directory. So you can actually know where your Node.js code is running from. So that's where I was running currently. There's many other things you can do in the process library or the package. Okay. So we talked about the process. The next one is the globe. And so in some sense, it's like the Windows object when you have run JavaScript in the browser. And of course, it doesn't have document anymore because this is a server, there's no browser window or web pages. So global actually has some useful things like the console is actually console.log is actually under globe. And if you remember, we also have similar things as in normal JavaScript called set timeout, which will pause the running of the JavaScript for a certain time. And also the later on things we need, for example, the module, the require, also comes from the global. Okay, so I'm gonna also now briefly mention the concept of the module. So as we said, Node.js comes with a very limited set of functions, and most of the things you need, you have to include as modules. But also, you can also define your own modules very easily. So if you want to including some new functions to your Node.js server, you use import. And if you want to create a new module that you can use in other part of a Node.js code or other people to use, and you use export. So that's all it is. So here it shows a very simple examples of how do you create a new module. So it defines a constant name is called messages. So it's a JSON object. There's something code inside. So all you need to do to make it a module, it just says exports. So that's the fixed part. Dot messages equal to messages. Okay, this is a slightly confusing, but the actual syntax is the first message is the name you want to give to the module. So you want to call this module messages, and the second message will be this object you defined before. So later other people can say import messages, and then they can use all these functions defined in there without having to rewrite them themselves. Does that make sense? So, I mean, this is kind of similar to any languages. Say Java, you can import different libraries before you use them. It's the same. So this is a very simple way to create new. And when you need to import, the actual keyword you use is not import. The actual keyword is called require. Okay, slightly confusing, but this is how it is. And then you followed by the URL or the path where the actual file is. So in this case, this will be the JavaScript file, which actually including this code and the export, so they can use that in other code. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna skip this part because it's not so relevant. Okay, and so these Node.js come with a few core modules, which is listed here. So the HTTP allows you to create an HTTP server, which is what mostly the Node.js are going to be used for. And UTIL is some utilities. So the query string, it allows you to pass the query string. Essentially, if you use a send a request, it will allow to get to say what is the property, what is the value for the property from the query string, which is also done using the URL. Finally, it's FS, stands for file system, so that allows you to say read, write local files on your Node.js server. Okay, these are some of the functions that the HTTP modules come with. We're not going to go through them now. We're going to see them later on when we create example, create a server using HTTP. So this will be probably the easiest one. So just say http.create server. It will create HTTP server and it will be running. And all the other ones is allows you to how to say and listen or respond to different requests. Okay. Gonna skip this one for now as well. Gonna look at that later when we come to it. Okay. Before we look at the actual example, and so first, there's many different ways you can find and install new npm or node packages. So if you know a name of a package, you could just install directly on the command line. But sometimes, for example, I don't know, let's say you want to install a module that allows you to say do syntax highlighting for your Node.js code, and you don't know what module that does, and you can go to some of these, or just Google, say, Node.pm modules, say syntax highlighting, it will come up with lots of options for you to do. So this is the official website. So, and then it's almost like a Google search engine. You can just type in anything you want to. And for example, I typed in markdown, maybe better as one word. And then you can see all the different modules that match that. And if you click on it, it will tell you, okay, what does this module does, how popular that is, etc., etc. Okay. So, in a sense, it's almost like, say, if you remember, in the Visual Studio Code, you have lots of extensions you can install. That's a similar thing. You can just search for them, find someone you can install and add that to your own Node.js server. Okay, so when you find some modules you want or packages you want to install, the way you install is a bit different. You don't download the file or exe file from the website and double click to run the install process. It's something like this. So you run npm install followed by the module name. Okay. So Node has its own module directories, so you don't have to say providing the URL or anything. It will automatically find the module online for you and download and install it. All you need is just to know the proper module name. Okay, and for example, this is something called super agent. And if you don't have it yet, you can just install and you type, in my case, let me exit this. npm list. Okay, so then I can just install, say npm install super agent, whatever that is. And if you type enter, and now it's actually going online and doing something. And okay, it has actually some warnings as well. But at the end, it just says, okay, it's installed now. It added 22 packages from 26 contributors, etc., etc. And do you know why I only want to install super agent, but it actually installs 22 packages? Anyone want to have a guess? This is actually very common.
Because the packages are required for super agent to work.
Yeah, exactly. So in most cases, the package you want to install, in this case super agent, will need other packages for it to work. And again, those it requires might need other packages to work. So npm will do it for you, just find all these every recursively required packages and install all of them. So that's why. Okay. And so now I do this something called npm list, which lists locally installed packages. So you can see at the top is the super agent, which is what I wanted, and everything underneath is what it needs to run. So debug is what needs to run, and then debug itself needs ms to run. Itself can run by itself, but that's everything that's required for super agent. And so this is quite common. For example, later I'm going to install, for example, the MongoDB driver, Node.js MongoDB driver. So you just do npm install Mongo, and it will install lots of other things needed as well. Okay, and so now finally is the example. So we write some actual Node.js code. In this, we're gonna actually creating an HTTP server using Node.js. Okay, so this HTTP server is very simple in the sense it cannot do any smart response, and all it does is just send hello world. Doesn't matter what your request is. Okay, obviously it's not very useful, but good to know how to create a server. So these are the code you need to write, put that in a JavaScript file. For example, called hello.js or server.js or something, and then when you run it, it will run a server. So if you look at this in more detail, so the first two lines, and anyone remembering what the first line the require does? We came across that before. The first line, it says require.
Imports it.
Yes, that's right. So the require is the keyword where you want to import some modules. We said in Node, many of the functions you need has to be imported first, it's not built in. So it requires, and we'll try to import this module called HTTP, and give it a name called HTTP as well. So then later on, you can reference to this module in your code that's called HTTP. Yeah. And the next one is set say a constant is value equal to 3000. So this is just as normal JavaScript. So you have a variable, its value is 3000, and it made it constant, so you can't change this later on. So which is a good thing. So if you have a server, you don't want the port to be changed all the time. Okay. So the next line says server, which refers to HTTP, which is this module you had, and dot create server. So that's a function which creates an HTTP server, and this is the two parameters. Okay, so this is the arrow function notation we seen before. So that means definition of a function, and it has two input parameters, REQ and RES. So usually this stands for request and response. Okay? So this function does not have a name, but has two parameters. The actual thing it does will be after the curly bracket, which starts from here and ends here. So I mean, maybe it's easier to look at this part. Okay, and so I say HTTP create server, and the server itself has to do something, which is the function here. It says I have two parameters, and what I do is I said res.writeHead. So my response, I'll write the head section of my response. So the 200 is the code for everything is okay. For example, sometimes if an error on the page, you have say 404 or 500 something, that's an error code. So 200 is the code for everything is okay. Then the browser knows, okay, the server is working properly. And then this part sets the content type. It says text or plain. So basically, it tells in the browser what kind of data I'm sending back. Is that a text file? Is that to say, I don't know, a video or image or something, different things, or zip file. So you set content type, and then it says dot end with this text string. It just says hello world. The slash end just means a line break. So all it says I can end with after the head. I can add this part to the actual body of my response, which is just hello world. Okay, and then followed by this. So once you create a server, you can say .listen, where you can set the port you're going to listen to. So by default, each server has different ports. Say the HTTP, which is web page, is 80. MongoDB is like 27051 or something. Okay, this is something you can set. Which here we set as 3000. That means this server going to be listened at the 3000 port. And this function here is what, how do I say? This is again an empty function with not even input meters. This is the function that will be run when the server first started. So you should see in the command line there's a message, so server running at this port. Okay, so that's give you a very simple HTTP code. Yeah.
You see on the line where it says HTTP create server.
Yeah.
Why isn't the request used?
Okay. Yeah. Very good question. So the question is, say here we have a request input basically from a function. Sorry, excuse me. But in this case, we're not using this at all. So actually, in the real world, when say, for example, you're requesting some data from the database, you would have to pass this request string and get the values out of it and to retrieve the data, etc. In this case, we just do a simplest HTTP server, which ignores whatever user sent, just only send hello world back. That's why we're not using the request parameter at all. Yeah. Okay. So once you create this file, and you can just run it by, we already said, say anything you run, just say node followed by the file that you want to run. So let's say the file is called Node.js, then it will just run. Sorry, the file is server.js, and it will just run. and there will be a server running, and it will be localhost by default because it's running locally, and the port will be 3000, which is what you set in the code, and it could either be localhost or say 127.0.0.1. This is equivalent, same thing. Okay. So we're actually gonna do that now, and we have a little bit of time. So let me see. I think I already created that on my computer. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you can see this is the code, which is exactly the same as in the slides. So we require the HTTP module first, and then we use a variable to define the value of the port, and then most of the things is just in one line of code, and it's break into different lines, so it's a bit easier to read. It says .create server request and the response. For the response, we write the code and then the content type, and we do add the load of the body of the response in hello world. That's all the same before. And then we could be listening on port, which is 3000, and what is started this function which console log this message. Okay, so what we could do is we could just run in the terminal here. So here you can always in the same directory as where the code is. Oops. So we can, if you remember, so the way to run it, just type maybe clear first, and followed by the file name. So this file is called server.js. So I just type no server.js and it runs. Okay, and so you can see there is a server with this line of message, which is what this console log here. So that's what this function runs. So it first runs when the server started. It says server running at this place, at this address and port. So if now I go to my browser and I can type in the actual URL that I typed in localhost, 3000, and okay, and it's very small, but it returns a message, which is what we set at the server response. Yeah. So this is an example of the simplest possible HTTP server that you can create. But later on, we're going to obviously make this more complex. For example, say in the actual response part, we're going to say look at the request string, and depends on what the request is, try to retrieve some data and maybe return some data as well. Okay, so this one will be just keep running here, and if you just want to stop it, just Control C on both Mac and Windows. It will stop the server. And now if we go back here, if we type localhost again, 3000, and it will say can't be reached because it's no longer there running. Okay, so that's the first part of today's lecture, and the reading is the first chapter of this book. So this is a free book. That's the link there if you click, and goes to the GitHub repository page of that book. And so it has two editions. We're going to use the second edition, Practical Node.js. And what we covered today is the first chapter. So if you just click on first chapter, chapter 1, and then click on the chapter 1.md. MD stands for Markdown file, and which should give you the actual book, the entire chapter, and you can read, which is very similar to what we covered. Okay, as we said, that's just the first part. we still have another thing to cover. We've got about a bit less than half an hour to do this. Okay, so the next part is about server communication. So basically, talking to the server from the client side. Ah, this is still way too big. Okay, and you're probably all familiar with this. So the client, which has front-end code, would often talk to the server for different things. Most often, is they retrieve some data from the server, or retrieve the page, or do something, or log in, or etc. And so the old way of doing this is, say, every time you get something back from the server, the entire page will reload, which is not necessary. Sometimes could take a long time and can be a bit annoying because if the page reloaded, everything, for example, you typed in will disappear as well, which is not very nice. You have to do it again. And so the newer way is called Ajax, which is already used in the last year. So what you probably all familiar with is, say, XML HTTP request, right? So that's how you talk to the server in the way you only request data and the return does not refresh the page. And you can update the page depends on what you get back. So, for example, all you do is, for example, say, what's the example? Say, let's say you contacting server to check if you get any new emails. So you send your HTTP request, it will send something back. Either has nothing, in which case there's nothing needs to be changed at all, or maybe you have one new emails. Then the page will be updated to add this one new emails, but not without refreshing everything on your page. Okay. Okay, and so this is like a quick review, which you have done before. You should have been all doing this in the second year, and using the XML HTTP request to contact server to get data, or short for XHR. And so you had to first create an HTTP request object, and then you say open, which link, then you type in the type of response you want to send, or type of request you want to send to the server, and then the URL of the server. So, do you remember the different types of requests you can do send to the server? So get is one of them. What are the other ones? Sorry? Post, yeah. Any other ones? So at least would be another one is called the put, and another one called delete, and there's some other ones.
Option.
Yeah. And we probably just need four. The most common four will be enough for our case. So the get will be retrieve data. The post is often used to create new record. Put will be update, and then delete will be delete something. Yeah. And then the server will say depends on the type of request and the information you send to do something. Okay. And you also need to set the response type. So basically, you have to tell the code what you're expecting to get back. And so in this case, it says plain text. And also, okay, so this is an important part. And so all these XML or HTTP requests is asynchronous. Anyone knows what asynchronous means? Yeah? Not quite. Actually, out of order. So most of the things you run locally on your computer is synchronous in something, and you run the code, you expect it to finish before you run the next line of code. If that one stuck, the line 1 stopped, it keep running, and line 2 will never be run until the one finished, right? So the asynchronous, it will be, say, once line 1 started running, it does not wait until it finished. It runs line 2 and 3 and 4 and etc. etc. Okay, that's asynchronous. The reason being this is, for example, if you send a request to a database to retrieve something, it could be, say, you don't have internet connection, or the database is down, or just network is very slow, it takes a long time. And it could be, say, if it's synchronous in the sense everything will stop, nothing gonna be able to do anything when it's waiting for the response. It might take, say, 30 seconds to time out to decide it's not working. And that means that 30 seconds user can't do anything at all. Everything kind of locked down, so that's not very nice. So instead, most of these, like a remote request, will be asynchronous in the sense, okay, I send a request, then I start doing other things. And when it results back, then it all depends on what sent back, I do other thing, do processing the things sent back. Yeah. Okay. But also that means any code depends on the result sending back from the server cannot run until you receive the result, right? So there's some other code, for example, okay, I can still handle any user button click and on my app. That's okay. I don't need any feedback from or response back from the database. I can do. But certain code, for example, update page to display the information sent back from server, have to wait until you receive the response. Yeah. So this is what the .unload do. So what it does, it force whatever the code after that, the function, these things will only be run after you received your response back. Okay, that's what .unload do. Okay, so once you set up all these things, so you need to say, okay, created an HTTP request object, you set the URL and set up your query string, so the type, and if you want to send anything, and then you set the response type, and you said, okay, how are you going to respond? And then finally do the send, which actually sends the HTTP request. Okay, so, So this is all the code together, and it's very simple. And it just says, okay, I want to get something from here, and you set the response type to text, and you say, when I receive the response, I will do this, which is just alert the request.response. The request is the request defined here, and just display the response you get from the server, and finally you send the request. Yeah. Okay, so nothing too fancy. But what we can do is actually we can run the previous Node server we just created. That server would always send back a response text message which says hello world, and then if this part works fine on your client side, it should pop up an alert box with hello world as a text. Yeah. So let me see if I have that. It's the date. Huh? Oh, okay, it's here. Okay, this is my example of the client side, because on the client side I can't run. In this case, I have to put this one in an HTML file, so I can put in these. So this part is exactly the same as we've seen before. You request or you create an HTML, XML, HTTP request object. You open the call, set the type and the URL, and you set the response type that you expect to receive. And you say, okay, once you receive, what do you do? In here, I'll just do this. Okay, and just to demonstrate the asynchronous nature, so I just add one extra line here. I say console log this line of code comes after the XHR request. Okay. So it really depends on the speed, but as an asynchronous nature, so once this request is sent, the browser actually is not going to wait for this one to run. It will actually execute this line. So we actually may see this line first before you have the alert box from the server. Yeah. So we're gonna, and so first start our server, so which is just this one. So I just run node server.js. So it will be running. And then we have to open this file locally. Okay, so might be slightly more difficult. I'm not even sure if it will work. But anyway, so you can see this is an empty page. It says xhr.html. Actually, once I run the page, it should have already run the code. But you can see so far we don't have the response back yet. Okay. Okay. So if I refresh the page, you can see here. So say this line of code comes after XHR request. That got displayed first, and which is what we wrote in here. Okay. And what is the other line of code? It says, and which is probably going to come across this as well, because later on you're going to run your Node server and your client on the same computer. But you have to say being blocked because this no access control allow origin header is set up in the requested resources. Okay, so basically, and what happens is, how do I say, in this code, which is run from a local server, we try to request resource using the XSR from a server which is not the same server that's running on this page. And that by default is not allowed. Does that make sense? So that's what so-called an access control allow original error is, which you're going to see quite a lot. And so to do that, we're running out of time again. Yeah. So actually, to solve that, you need to actually add this line of code to your Node.js server. It just says set header, and then allow access control. So, and access control allow original. And in this case, we just put start, which is it means allow everything. And if you add that line to your server, which is the Node.js, it should work. So which is basically what this line here does. It was disabled by default. So basically that says this line. Okay, it's used slightly different one. It says request.header.origin. So it just says allow the wherever the request was sent. Does the same thing. And then if we restart the server, we stop this and then run it again. I'll have to save this and run node. Now it's running again. And if I come back here and if I refresh this page, essentially try to do this again. Okay, so you can see now it works. It doesn't have that error. And this message actually got displayed first before the message popped up. Otherwise, it will only display after this, if it's synchronous, after you click OK before this pops up.
How does it know to display hello world?
Sorry?
How does it know to display hello world?
Okay, so if you look at this code, first look at this code, it will display the response from whatever you get from the server, right? And for the server itself, and it always sends just a message, hello world. And then once you get that text back, it will get displayed here. Yeah. And if you have more complex response, it will also send it back. Okay, so far is what you have already learned in second year, just a quick review. Okay, now we're going to learn something a little bit new called a fetch. Okay, so fetch is built into JavaScript, and so it's you don't need to say load any library file so to do that, and it's meant to be a replacement for the XML HTTP request. Okay, so to do exactly what we did before, so basically to do where's the code? To do this. And to do these kind of things, and the code you will need to use and done using fetch is something like this. Okay. We'll have a quick look at this, and it's relatively simple. So it says fetch followed by actual URL we want to contact, and then dot then. So this is like the unload. So basically, whatever is inside the then will be run after you get the response from the server. Okay, and then it says it's a function. So this is the response you get from the server. Okay, and the actual thing we will do will be says response dot text. So that's the text from the response. Again, you have this dot then. So that's the second fetch. It just what it says. Okay, if you get text from, you then do this, which is alert the text. Okay. Okay. The important concept or the things you need to learn here is something called promises. Okay. So the promises is what will be returned by the server, but not quite there yet. So when you do this fetch, essentially you create a promises. The promises in the sense the server will definitely give you some responses, but it's not there yet. That's just basically what it's called. And then you can decide what to do with the promises when it actually happens is using the dot then. That's all it is. And yeah. And in this case, we actually did twice. And then we can get a response, and then we can say, when say response dot text itself, again returns a promises. It says I can definitely return you something, and in terms of text in the response, and then use dot then just says, okay, when I get that response, what I can do will be here. Okay. Yeah, and that's all. So basically, for the next coursework or all the practice, we're going to using the fetch instead of the XML HTTP request ending. Okay, so it just the way it works is very similar. You just need to get used to the syntax how to use this. So use the fetch and the response functions, and again you can fetch again using promises. Okay, so in terms of reading, the fetching, so that's the link there. This is coming from the Mozilla Developer Network. So this is a document, tells you how to use fetch, what it is. So it's very similar to what we covered. Yeah, okay, that's all.